In this video, we're going to learn the absolute basics of knitting. This is for someone who has never tried knitting or maybe just needs a refresher. We're going to go through a little bit about yarn, needles, how to cast on, how to work the knit stitch, and how to do a basic bind off. So let's get started. The first thing we want to talk about is knitting needles. Now, I have a lot of different knitting needles. They come in lots of different materials. I have some plastic needles here. I have some metal needles. I have bamboo and other plastic varieties here. When you're getting started, it's a good idea to try a variety of different kinds and see what you like best. I find that metal needles, the yarn kind of slides over them. That could be a little too slippery for a beginner. And the bamboo are a little grippier as well as the plastic. So try different ones and see what you like best. Now, when you're looking for the sizing of your needle, it can be printed either on the side like this one here, or it could be printed at the top, or it could be at the end of the needle, like the little cap here at the end. So you'll see that there's usually a millimeter size. So this one happens to be a 6mm knitting needle, and it's a US 10. You can use a little tool, it's very inexpensive, called a needle gauge. And what this does is you can see it has a series of holes and sizes, and you can put your needle through the holes and see what size needle that you have. So this one, the needle fits easily into this hole, so we have a 10.5 needle size for this one, okay? So you can use that if you're not sure about your needle size. But otherwise, it should be printed or stamped into the needle itself, okay? So when you're using yarn, your yarn will have a label on it, and it will show you what the yarn weight is for your yarn. So if you look at your yarn label, you'll see a little knitting ball here with a number on it. Now this one is a medium 4 on the yarn weight scale. There is a whole scale of yarn weights, and that shows the thickness or the size of the yarn that you'll be using. This is especially helpful if you need to make yarn substitutions or figure out what needle to use with your yarn. We'll also have a recommended needle size. Now, because we're knitting, we want to look at the knitting needle box. There's a crochet hook box and a knitting needle box. This particular yarn is a number 4 on the yarn weight scale and recommends a 5mm US 8 needle, okay? Now, if you look at other yarn labels, it may not be in the same place, but you can kind of look at different manufacturers of yarn, and it might be displayed a little differently on the yarn label. So this one is also happens to be a medium 4 on the yarn weight scale, US 8. It actually happens to be the same thing, but you can see how it's displayed a little bit differently. But just look for that yarn ball, and that's kind of where I start. Also, you can look at your yarn label and you can see that they all have different yarn lengths, okay? So there's 415 yards on this yarn ball. Also, that translates to 380 meters, 7 ounces, 200 grams, okay? So when you're following a pattern, you can look for that information on your yarn ball and see what you need and what the yarn has, okay? So now that we've learned about yarn and our needles, let's grab a pair of needles and learn how to cast on to start a project. So I grabbed a pair of needles. These are metal needles, US 10.5 knitting needles, and I have some number 4 weight yarn. Again, if you're looking for a certain needle to use with the yarn you have, look for that recommended needle size as a good jumping off point to start, okay? So we're going to learn how to cast on using the long tail cast on. That's one of the most basic cast on techniques that you can use for getting stitches onto your needle. So we're going to grab just one needle, and then what we want to do is, because it's called the long tail cast on, we want to leave a little bit of a tail because we're going to use that to add stitches to our needle, okay? So just take, I would say, a couple of feet here. So I did about, let's go back, about 2 rulers worth just to get me started, okay? For the long tail cast on, you do have to estimate a little bit. I like to do a little more than I think I'll need just for, you know, to be safe. Okay, so I'm going to come in very closely now so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is grab one of our needles and get our first stitch on here with our slip knot, okay? So all you're going to do, now there's different ways to do it. This is the way I've always liked to do it. You may see other tutorials where they do it a little bit differently, but it always arrives at the same place, okay? So the way I like to do it is I like to take the yarn, wrap it around my two fingers to make a loop. Then I kind of pinch that with my thumb and slide my fingers out so I have a loop in my hand. Then I take the yarn behind the loop, grab your needle, reach in, and then we're just going to kind of like pull those tails to tighten. And then you can kind of open it up to tighten it onto your needle. Okay, let's do that one more time. You're going to take your yarn, wrap it around your two fingers to make a loop. Pinch it with your thumb. Now carefully kind of slide your fingers out. Now still holding the yarn, bring it behind that loop that you just made, just like that. Then you're going to take your needle, reach in, bring up that loop, and we're going to just kind of let go and pull down to tighten. And then we're going to take our fingers and kind of snug it up against the needle. You don't want to make it too tight because we are going to work back into this stitch in a minute, okay? Now, we're going to learn how to cast on. This is actually our first stitch, okay? So what we're going to do is this yarn here that goes this way is connected to our yarn ball. This is known as the working yarn. This is the yarn that you'll feed into your project the whole time. We also have our tail that we created a few minutes ago. And again, as you can see, it's a little longer than it needs to be, but I like to do that just for safety's sake, just to make sure I have enough. Okay, so we're going to do the long tail cast on. So what we want to do is kind of hold our needle up, and you can see the two strands are hanging down. This one being the working yarn, this one being the tail, okay? And then what you can do is take your index finger and your thumb, and what you're going to do is you're going to take your pinky like this, and you're going to kind of scoop that up. Now, take your index finger and your thumb and bring it through and sort of open it up. See how it looks like a diamond or a kite maybe? Take your needle, and what you're going to do is you're going to come up under your thumb like this and pick up that loop. Then you're going to go around your index finger like this, and then you're going to bring that through the loop that's on your thumb. Now, did you see how I just picked up another stitch here? And then just kind of tighten it down, okay? Now we have two stitches. Now I didn't let go of my yarn yet because what I'm going to do is open it back up, and I have that same diamond shape. Now take your needle and go around your thumb, through that finger, see, kind of come up under that, and then come through your thumb again. So I picked up another stitch, and then we're going to take our needle and kind of give it a tug and pull it down to tighten. Now we have 3 stitches, okay? I didn't let go. I still have my diamond shape. Now we're going to go around our thumb, around the finger, and through the thumb loop, just like that, and tighten, okay? Now I let go, but it's easier if you don't, especially when you're learning. But if you do let go, remember, grab it with your pinky, put your index finger and your thumb through that opening, open it up like a diamond, okay? Take your needle and just do this as many times as you need to get this number of stitches that you want, okay? Let's do a couple more very slowly, and then we'll pick up the pace a little bit. So take your needle and go around the thumb, around the finger, through the thumb loop, and tighten. Around the thumb, around the finger, through the thumb loop, and tighten. Okay? Let's do that a couple more times. Around, around, and through. 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 Okay? So now we have, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's do 12, just to make it nice and even, okay? So now we have 12 stitches on here. You can go for as long as you want. If you're doing a scarf or a shawl, you want lots more stitches on here, okay? If you're following a pattern, just follow what the pattern says. Once you get the number of stitches that you want, then you're going to grab your other needle and you're going to pass this work. See how it's in my left hand? We're going to kind of flip it over, put it back in our left hand. Now this tail here, we're just going to scoot that out of the way. We're not going to worry about that anymore until we're done. And then you can weave that in if you like. Okay? So I'm going to get a little bit more yarn, and now we're going to learn how to knit the actual knit stitch. Okay? So what we're going to do is take our right needle. Now I have my work in my left hand, and we're going to take our needle, and what we're going to do is we're going to insert the needle into this first stitch. And when you do that, you're going to go into this loop and you're going to come up under that needle. So it's underneath of that needle on your left. Then you're going to take remember your working yarn is connected to your yarn ball. You're going to take your working yarn, and it really is a matter of practice of how you like to hold the yarn while you knit. I like to hook mine on my pinky finger, and then I like to take my index finger, or I like to just hold it like that, okay? But I do like to hook it around my little finger back here just to keep good tension throughout my project. That'll be important, okay? So then what you're gonna do is you're going to wrap the yarn around just the bottom needle, and then you're gonna take this bottom needle and you're gonna slide it to the front, taking up that loop, okay? So I'm gonna turn this a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Take this needle and we're going to slide it around and to the front here. See how I picked up that stitch? And then you're going to push it off. And that's it. That's a knit stitch. Okay, let's do a few more together. Now at this point, you might want to give everything a little bit of a tug just to kind of tighten it up a little bit. All right, now insert the needle into the next stitch. Wrap the yarn around that bottom needle. Bring the needle from the back to the front, picking up that loop and push it off. Next, insert the needle into the next stitch. Remember, keep that needle on the bottom. Wrap the yarn around the needle, just the bottom needle, then bring it from the back to the front, sliding it around, picking up that stitch and push it off. Okay? Let's do a couple more slowly together and then we'll pick up the speed. Okay, insert the needle into the next stitch. Wrap the yarn around that bottom needle, bring the needle from the back to the front, and push it off. Insert the needle into the next stitch. Wrap the yarn around the bottom needle, bring the needle from the back to the front, picking up that loop, and push it off. Okay? So you're just going to do this all the way across in all the stitches. Okay? Insert. Wrap the yarn around the needle, bring it from the back to the front, and push it off. In, around, through, 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 push it off. Now, there are slow motion features on YouTube that you can use, but please feel free to back up the video at any time if you need to rewatch any parts of this. Okay, so we just completed our first row. It doesn't look like much, but you can kind of build off of this. Okay, so when you're ready to go from one row to the other, now our work, if you notice, has moved from when we knitted from our left needle to our right needle. So what we want to do when we are ready to work on the next row is we want to take our needle in our right hand and we're going to pass it back over to our left hand, okay? Now grab your needle, your empty needle once again, and you'll just do the same thing. Let's move to the next row, okay? Now you want to make sure when you insert your needle into this first stitch, see this loop here? It's a little bit loose on that first stitch usually. You want to make sure you're going to go on top of that. You don't want to go into it. See, you don't want to go into it like that. You want it to stay down and you want to go over top of it, okay? That can sometimes be confusing when you're learning how to knit, and it can appear as two stitches over here on the needle and add a stitch on, okay? So just make sure when you insert your needle, you're going on top of that loop, okay? So go ahead and insert your needle into that first stitch, wrap the yarn around that bottom needle, bring it from the back to the front, picking up that loop and push it off. Same thing we did before. Insert the needle into the next stitch, go around, bring it through, picking up that loop and push off. And you're just going to do the same exact thing that you did in the previous row. So you can make your little knit swatch as big as you want it to be, work as many rows as you want. We're just knitting all the stitches. Now, when you're starting, you're getting the hang of your tension. So your stitches might look a little bit uneven. They might look a little loopy in some places. They might look a little tight in other places. That's totally normal. What you're also doing when you're learning how to knit, and we're on the last stitch here, what you're also learning when you're learning how to knit is you're developing some muscle memory. So your hands are figuring out how to manipulate the yarn and the needles, okay? So once again, when you're ready to start a new row, pass it to your other hand and see how that loop, it kind of like lifts up here. So what you want to do is you want to just make sure when you insert the needle that you're going over top of that. It just kind of gets in the way sometimes, okay? So focus when you begin on going nice and slow. You want to focus on having quality stitches, and the speed with practice and practice and practice will come later. It can be frustrating for some people to learn how to knit at first, but with lots of practice and just doing the same thing over and over and over again, you will learn how to master these stitches, okay? And you just need to make maybe lots of swatches or lots of scarves or dishcloths at first until you move on to other skills, okay? So all you'll do is just create as many rows as you want, knitting all the stitches, okay? Now, if you're ready for more projects and more knitting techniques, hop on over to my knitting library to check out everything. The link is down below. So the next thing we're going to do is add a little bit more length to this and then learn how to bind off on our stitches. Okay, when you've knitted as much as you want to knit and you're ready to get this off the needles, I'm going to show you the basic bind off. This is a really easy way to finish off a project. So what you're going to do is have the work in your left hand once again, and you're going to knit a stitch, same way we did before. So knit a stitch, knit a second stitch, and then you're just going to take this first loop that you made here and you're going to bring it up, over, and off the needle. Now you can do this whatever way is easier for you. Some people like to pick it up with their fingers and lift it off. Some people like to use the needle, okay? So what you can do is take that loop and lift it up, over, and off the needle, leaving that other loop on the needle still, okay? Now knit a second stitch and do the same thing. Lift that first loop up, over, and off the needle. Knit another stitch. Same thing. Lift it up, over, and off. Knit another stitch. Lift that first loop, that closest loop to you, up, over, and off. And you're just going to do this for the rest of your stitches, okay? If you notice, when I go to lift the loop, you'll notice that I give it a tug like this. That kind of loosens it up from the needle and allows me to just pick it up a little bit easier, okay? So you'll just do this until just one loop is left on your needle, okay? So just keep knitting and lifting up, over, and off. Knit one, lift that stitch up, over, and off. Lift it, give it a tug if you need a little bit to create a little bit more space in there. Lift it up, over, and off, and then knit that last stitch and lift it up, over, and off the needle, okay? So now we have just one loop left on our needle. Okay, so that last loop, what we're going to do is you'll just cut, leaving a little bit of a tail here, and then you're going to kind of gently work, like kind of loosen up that loop a little bit, carefully slide the needle out. You don't want to pull this right now because this is your last active stitch of your project, and if you pull, it'll unravel, okay? So I like to just kind of like pinch that down while I'm grabbing this loop or this tail here. to keep it from pulling out, okay? It's a little fragile right now because there's no needle holding it together. All right, and then take your end and you're just gonna send it through the loop. This is what we call fastening off in a pattern. If you might see that in a pattern, that's what we're talking about. Okay, and then you're just gonna kind of snug that down a little bit, okay? And that is how you bind off. Now I like to just straighten out what I've knitted and get it all my stitches all nice and neat. Now, and if you want to, at the end, you can take a yarn needle. It's also called a tapestry needle. And you can just kind of thread it onto a needle and leaving a little bit of a tail, go into the center part of your knitted fabric that you just created, okay? So just kind of go in between those loops. And I like to do an inch or two in, pull it in there. And we don't want to pull it too tight because see, if I pull it too tight, it distorts it. See how I pulled it down, kind of made it misshapen? And then sometimes I just take it back in the other direction and that kind of locks the tail into place, okay? So you can kind of bring it back in the other direction like that, and then just use your scissors and give it a snip. And then you can do the same with your other tail. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. That is how you knit for the absolute beginner. This will get you started making all kinds of things like scarves, dishcloths, blankets, lots of really basic projects. So be sure and check out my knitting library where I share other projects and other knitting techniques as well. Thanks so much for watching and be sure and hit the subscribe button to get all the latest Sparkle and Splatter video updates. Thanks again, everyone.